Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for another Watercolour Wednesday. This is one of my little watercolour Christmas presents to myself. I found these on offer just before, well, in fact it was quite a long time before Christmas, to be honest, but you've got to take the bargains when you can. And you won't be surprised to learn that I was very tempted by the grey tones of these. These are made by a company called Fumui, whose brushes I got some of, very special sort of long tipped brushes. I'll share those with you in another video coming up soon. And they are highly opaque, much like the Kuritakis, and actually they come in very similar shape pans. So yeah, I decided I would splash out and treat myself to this set. I think they're going to make my winter watercolor life quite a happy one. So this is the color swatch sheet that comes in the box. I'm going to have a first go with these and just put them onto there, and hopefully we'll also get to just a little bit of maybe doodling to have a play with them. This is my first exploration, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they get up to. They are, yeah, tones of grey, as you can see. I'll try to make sure everything stays on here, and then maybe if we get to some doodling, I'll zoom in a little bit. I think I might do a sort of strong at one end and then opening out with some water to the other end of these. So they've got these in tones, so red greys 1 2 3, yellow greys 1 2 3, brown greys, we'll get to all that. I do want to make sure I get to see how opaque they are, so even at the very watery end, it looks to me as though there's quite a high degree of opacity, so that's fun to play with. Very different from most of the watercolour paints that I have, which are largely translucents. I work a lot with the Daniel Smiths, as you'll know. Regulars will be familiar with those. But there's something very nice about these chalky, soft pastel tones. And because they all carry a hint of grey, you'll know how much of a fan of grey I am. That's red grey 1, red grey 2. I'm just going to lift off a little bit at this end, just because I know the pigment will continue to spread in that direction. So I'm just going to send it back, and if that gives me sort of blooms and textures in it, I'm also not terribly bothered about that. I think it's quite interesting to play with blooms when the texture sort of makes its way into the pigment, and you get, people call them sort of cauliflower marks. But to me there's something quite fun in that, because I like the texture of it. That's a pretty colour. It's got a sort of smoky, almost terracotta to it, but without the orange tones of terracotta. Definitely clay-like. So the feeling I'm getting from those is definitely a clay kind of thing. So yellow grey, you would think, given that I hardly ever touch yellow, that yellow tones might not be up my street, but I'm just looking at them in the palette. The yellows actually are tempting me quite heavily. I think they're rather beautiful, maybe because they have a similarity to those warm greys that I love, the pumice stones, grey titanium from Daniel Smith, the French grey from American Journey, all those kind of warm greys that have that vintage look to them. You can see I'm not being terribly careful about staying inside the lines. The thing about watercolour is it likes to move. What I don't want is any moisture to go into the next box along, because that means it will spread and they'll start to blend. Blending will come soon. So this is yellow grey number 3, and you can see they're getting darker as we go. Strictly, I mean strictly, you shouldn't need all of these colours, because if you had, for instance, yellow grey 3 and then a white or a soft grey, you could progressively get yourself those lighter tones. But pre-mixed colours are time savers, basically, are what they are. You can, of course, mix up any colours. In an official world, all you would need is a warm blue, a warm red, a warm yellow, a cool red, a cool blue and a cool yellow, a white and a black, and you should be able to mix up pretty much anything colour tone wise. So onto the brown greys, and my goodness, that's a colour that makes me happy. Again, I'm just going to lift back because I let it come a little too far. Brown grey number 2. These have a sort of plumminess to them, which is interesting. It's got a sort of, when I say plum, obviously I'm not going full on mauve, but there's just a sort of underlying pinkness, even to the browns here, that is quite pleasurable. Obviously, I'm going to really enjoy this lower corner with the blues and greens, but for now, very happy with what's appearing on the mat, on the paper. This is quite a nice paper to swatch on as well. So standard swatching is, you know, it is what it is. We get the first chance to see what the paints will get up to, first chance to see what colours we've really got in play. That's a really lovely sort of winter earth colour. What have we got next? Warm grey 1. Okay, looking at it in the palette, it looks cooler to me than the yellows, but you know, I'm prepared to take it. I would say that's a bit of a bluey grey rather than a warm grey, but as you like it. I suppose compared to what they're calling cold grey down here, so that's warm grey they've labelled, and these 3 are cold grey. So I suppose maybe in that comparison, that's fair. But right next to the yellow greys, which is where they're sitting, that's actually relatively neutral slash slightly cooler, I'd have thought. But we'll see. Once we've got the cold greys on the page, we'll know a bit more about how they're defining that. I'm loving the degree of variation you can get here. Ooh, that's very heavily pigmented, that one, compared to some of the others. That felt like it went on very richly without very much work at all. So let's see how light it can get. Really nice. Really nice. That they move beautifully on the paper. That's a sign of decent paper, but it's also a sign of good paints. So that's quite delightful to know. Let's go in here for what they're calling a green grey. This ought to be up my street, I would think. Oh, it's pretty. It's definitely icy. It's got a sort of Arctic ice feel to it, I would say, that one. Something quite delicious about that. I've got, as always, two pots of water on the go. They're both now quite pigmenty. Oh, that's pretty. Yeah. For those of you who love vivids and brights, sorry, this won't be a box of paints for you. This is about neutrals, greys, subtlety, misty, melancholy mornings, soft twilight dusks, delicate winter landscapes. But also, I mean, looking at these, what they call red greys, I call them pink greys, but okay. I'm thinking there's some cherry blossom in there somewhere, for sure. And as I say, Arctic, really enjoying that Arctic feel to those green greys. That's lovely. What do we got here? Purple grey, okay. I mean, starting with the very palest of mauves, but that's, oh, that's pretty. I can see that being lavender, maybe somewhere in a very delicate little pansy, or violet. Spring violets could have that very delicate hue. Might be something nice in the lilac and wisteria world. So these aren't going to be only about winter. Oh yes, yeah, wisteria. I feel it coming on. Hydrangeas, I can see living somewhere in there. That's very pretty. Let it just spread out a little bit. Yeah, keep moving. So that one was slightly less willing to move. Interesting, just noticing these things as I go. And Purple Grey 3, what have you got for us? Oh, so interestingly, that tone, not quite so happy in my brain. It's got, oh, I like it as it spreads out though. I do like that. There was just something a bit muddy about that tone as it went on in its thick version, but as it spreads out, actually it does have a gentler, clearer self. Ooh, those greens as they dry, look at that. So as I say, these are very much for a specific use. These I don't think I'll think of them as sort of general purpose watercolours. I think as a palette they'll continue to very much live together. I can't see that I would often be putting them into another painting necessarily where I'm using other watercolours. These feel like they want to play together. Although, having said that, if we're thinking cherry blossom, what would be lovely with those chalky blossom colours would be to go for some really vivid spring greens, green gold, sort of the equivalent of maybe a twisted citron in distress. That blue grey is making me very happy. No surprises. No surprises. As a lover of stormy sky and weathered wood and those blue greys from the distressed tones, as a lover of the lunar blues in the Daniel Smith, as a lover of the coastal blues in the American Journey paints, no accident that I'm enjoying that little blue-grey corner there. And finally, what they like to call the cold grey. So this, I mean, this one does look really icy, really sort of silvery grey. And it does almost have a sort of purple tone to it. And when I say purple, I don't mean imperial purple. I mean that family of purple. There we go. That's a very subtle little grey going on there. That could be a really good mixing colour, actually. And the other joy, if you're mixing very translucent paints with something opaque like this, the opaque does tend to win out, but it can mean you get a sort of extra bang for your buck, that your translucent colours can take on an opaque tone. And I think that cold grey would be quite good at mixing without interfering too much with the basic tone of the colour you're mixing it with. That will bear experimenting on. So yeah, I can very much see now as that's drying, comparing what they call the warm grey with the cool greys, cold greys, not just cool, cold. It is cold. It's January here. It's snowy outside. And yeah, cold grey is definitely in the mix weather-wise at the moment. As yeah, some of our snow is turning to slush at the moment. So that's just really pleasurable swatching. I'm afraid it is a little bit grim outside, so I have got the artificial light on. It's not absolute daylight, but at least it doesn't completely shift the colours of things. Hopefully that gives you a reasonable idea of what those can get up to. And I might, yeah, let's grab a piece of paper and just do a bit of doodling. What I might do is grab those brushes I was talking about and show you those in action as well. I've popped some fresh water in my jam jars. These are my standard, the ones that my go-to brushes really, the silver black velvets in round. There's a size 20, a size 8, and I think it's a size 2 maybe, yeah. And yeah, if you're using a round brush, those tend to be what I'll go for. Obviously, I've got various other flavors, shapes as well, mop brushes, flat brushes. These are the Fuumuui needle point brushes, and what's pretty extraordinary about these is you've got this thick head similar to the round, soft bristles in here, but then they come to this extended very fine point with some bristles that are altogether slightly stiffer. And what that does as you're holding moisture is it means you've got lots of paint to put down, but you can also get to a very fine line at any point in your painting. So I think it's probably worth just doing a couple of brush strokes, maybe on, yeah, just reaching for my paper, on the Clairefontaine pad. So this is not expensive paper. This is what I would call a sort of mid-range. It's a cotton cellulose mix for really good watercolor time. If you can manage to find and afford 100% cotton paper, that is always the way to go. So let me just compare for you. Straight down, maybe, I mean, it's not quite fair because that's obviously a bigger brush, but let's just do a simple stroke of the one and a simple stroke of the other. Yeah, I say a simple stroke. Clearly, so this is blue grey 3 I'm heading for. Just going to load up the brush. So you can, with a brush, it's always worth spending some time with a brush, just working out what you can achieve with it. So even this, if you lift and move, can get you really subtle and fine line effects. Lifting with that softness, just rolling into the page for texture. Always play with your brushes, see what they'll do for you. See what you can get a brush to do. So even that huge, look at that paint move. That's gorgeous. Good to know. And again, that's a sign of that this paper is, you know, not awful. Because if you can get that amount of movement from that, that's pretty nice. So with this one, let's have a go with now the needle point. Again, I'm going to try and load up with a similar amount of paint, see what we can get. And I'm going to try and do a similar sort of gesture, just so we can see what we get. So I'll start and then I'll press down. So you immediately get that shift and change, but then I can lift to an incredible, that I just need more water in my paint. That's all. So I'm just going to make sure that's fully loaded up and fully fluid. It was just a bit dry, I think. Let's go. So down and up to a really soft point, and so much control of that as well. So you can see there's still lots of paint going down on the paper. Let's just soften ourselves into some, but back to this neat, I mean, that is, because it's stiffer in those end bristles, going to see what we can do in terms of releasing this paint again. But I'm always going to be able to lift to almost a calligraphic effect with the tip of that brush. Let's put some more water in there. This really has got a lot of paint in it now. You can see that because I took the time to load it up more fully. So I'm going to be able to, because the body of the brush is holding so much paint, I can carry on painting for quite a long time. I can create something that is maybe leafy, something that's got a bit of texture, but it's going to always have that possibility to lift away to the very fine point. And you can see I haven't loaded the brush up again. I could keep going across most of the page, I think, probably with that. Let's just switch papers now, because that's another test of a paint. So switching brushes, switching papers. We'll do some more exploring with these brushes at some point, because they are fun to play with. I might move to a slightly finer one just to, yeah, it's not, yeah, it's sort of the middle size. And I think for this, what I might want to do, so this was my very first play with these brushes, and you can see just getting those puddles of colour, and then extremely fine, and then mixing and matching and moving, experimenting with the new brushes. So that was the Fumui brushes, but with Daniel Smith paper. So let's see what we get up to today. I'm just gonna make sure the brush is nice and wet, and then yeah, I might go for a sort of, let's see what we can do in terms of cherry blossom. Just gonna pick up some of this red grey, trying to juggle the space so that you can see what I'm getting, so that the paper can dry, so that things aren't going missing for you. There we go. Let's just doodle in some centres there of potential flower blossom. I want a little bit of the darker red, I think, in there. So just some dots of colour to start with. It's quite wet, that paint. And then what I'll do is allow it to spread out just with some clear water. I'm going to see what I can achieve in terms of just letting those flower petals do their own thing. You go in that direction. So this is the bamboo paper. This is a really pretty colour. Sorry, just got distracted. Just going to see what happens. These are all still new games to me in this brush, in this paint. I'm going to see if I can extend my flower petals with a sort of softness and a looseness. And at the moment, that's just clouds of colour. You can see that it is. Those central ones are going to spread out. And then it's just a question of building in the impression of a flower petal. Soft, loose blossoms, just going in multiple directions. And then I might drop in a little bit of that deeper red so that it can go for a little walkabout. And this is going to stay very chalky. It's always going to be chalky because that's what these paints are. Just allowing a sort of an impression of flower heads without too much of a sense of control. Or I'm going to let those dry a little bit while I come in with maybe, see, the yellow green is tempting, but I think I'm a little more tempted to combine this with something like the blue grey, and I'm gonna go for one of the finer ones of these brushes, so really down to maybe, yeah, this is the little teeny one. Pick up a bit of blue grey, just really let that build. Let's give it a spritz of water because they've not been in action for a while since and then I'm just going to try and create the finest of possible stems. I thought of a stem. You could maybe come out this way. Maybe you come straight down. I'm still working on the balance of the amount of paint in the brush head versus what comes out of the end. That's really the experiment here. I want to put a couple of, I need to wait till this dries a bit more. I'm really tempted to put in some sort of stameny bits, but I think I need to wait. Might come down behind you. That was a nice, simple little twirl. And we'll just get something coming down. Again, the hint of a stem. I might just use this to, with the blue-grey 1. Again, still discovering what the brush stroke does. If I were working with a brush I knew, I'd know how to make my leaf. I'm thinking I want to go upwards. There we go, that's quite nice. And into that, I feel like I just want to put, again, just a hint of that dark. Just a flick of it. Again, it'll be worth doing that again once it's dry, or having a go. That's very pretty. Let's come again with some of this. And we could maybe go a bit softer and a bit broader in the background, something quite wet. So you've just got that sense of leafiness. Without it necessarily being connected. There's too much in that. I want to knock that back a little bit, like lift it. No, too late. Well, let's let that be a shadowy leaf down the bottom here. Maybe I can get this paint to move. Oh, there's interesting. I didn't really want to, but I seem to have shifted it a bit now. Don't fiddle too much. This is doodling, playing, exploring, finding out what you've got. So I'm not going to try and produce a perfect finished painting. I'm liking how these flower petals are starting to dry, and I do want to go in a bit more paint in my brush and just give myself some spots of stamen. If it travels a bit in those flower petals, I'm fine. There is still quite a lot of moisture in some of those petals. I'm just giving myself that hint of a centre to those flower heads. Soft greys, very pretty. I am going to go in with my good old spatter brush. Not the posh new watercolour brushes. Going to get just a little bit of delicate grey spatter onto there. Take that for a little journey. I'm going to lift this leaf up a little bit because it's a bit more than I wanted in there. Lift that leaf up a little bit because it's a bit more than I wanted in there. I think I do want one somewhere in the centre here. Just a little cloud of soft grey. Yeah, there you go. See, that's the thing. Don't overthink. Just go. What I do want to do though is protect that from there. Or do I? It's quite nice if it's behind it, mind. So maybe what I can do is with a little bit of pink, just say, no, this flower's in front, thank you very much. This flower's got a bit of texture. This flower's got a little bit of extra petal. So now I'm looking at where some of the shaping is and just allowing that to inform a few brush strokes to add detail. Nice, completely impressionistic flowers. No breed that I know of. Interesting how dark that red grey 3 is. So there we go. Little bit of swatching, little bit of early doodling, and yeah, I mean, so much more experimenting to be done. I'm not even close to being in charge of what those paintbrushes are doing. That's what I'm trying to dig out time for myself. in between lots of other exciting things going on here. Very busy world at the moment here at Words and Pictures and in the wider world. But that's quite a nice place to start. I'm going to let that dry. I'll just make some notes down the side of what I used so that I can remember. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that little first investigation. Part of me is now really tempted to come in and add just a little bit of the green grey to some of these leaves, because they're quite blue. Maybe what I can do is just add a smudge of green into the mix. And because I don't want the pointy bit, I've gone back to my silver black velvet. See, that's a pretty addition. I like that quite a lot, that green grey. And that means I can also just have a stem, maybe just a stem extending in a grassy kind of way. And a stem extending in a grassy kind of way. Flicking, I always forget how good flicking can be. So some soft foliage in amongst the branches, in amongst the stems, beg their pardon. That'll do for now. Just stop fiddling. Stop fiddling. Nice to experiment. Nice to put some of that green grey in there, I think. That's got a different tone, really, compared to the blue grey. Okay, as I said, going to let it dry. I will, as always, add some details about what's in the mix here. Do that with a bigger brush. Check the description below the video for today's ingredients. And if you've enjoyed that little bit of both swatching and playtime, do give me a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, I would love to have your company on this creative journey, aiming to fit in a bit more watercolour playtime this year, all being well. There it goes, drifting off, smoky green. Oh, how pretty. Bit more of that just up in this top corner. Oh no, don't like it. Get rid of it. Lose it. It just made everything too heavy at the top of the page, but I might flick in a bit of green grey. There we go. Now I'm going to stop fiddling. Thanks so much for your company, as always, and happy crafting all.